Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. It's been a long weekend and a very cool, amazing weekend. I met so many people, and of course there was the Happiness is Handmade award ceremony, and you guys nailed it. I won the Design Magician award for my work, and you guys made that happen because it was a community voting, so thank you so much for this award. I'm gonna put it right there in the background. I have to do something with my background here. It's always there and it's so blank and boring, so maybe at some point I'm gonna add some shelves and have this on display. But look how pretty it is. Really cute. It's wood, which I really like, and yeah, I'm super happy. So thank you so much for this award. It's your work, and yeah, I'm very proud. But let's start with the video. Today we're going to continue with the Dirndl that I have been working on for quite some time now. If you haven't already, you should definitely check out part 1 and 2, where I made this beautiful dress right there. The bodice is one part and the skirt is the second part. So if you haven't checked that out yet, links will be up here and then also in the description box down below. So go ahead and do so and come back once you're done with that. For everybody who has already seen how I made this dress, we're going to continue today with the blouse, because as you can see it's quite bare still up here, and we have to work on the blouse to finish it up. We're also gonna still have to make the apron. That is not yet done because I haven't received my fabric yet, but I ordered some really fancy green silk, so that's gonna be amazing. Once I have it, I will be uploading a video on that. So what my plan for the blouse is to actually drape the blouse. So blouses for Dirndl have basically a cut that stops under the bust. So most of them are elastic and just stop right here. We're going to make one that is pretty simple. We're not gonna make anything with lace or something like that because I just want to have a clean blouse. I have blouses with lace and all of that already, so for me personally, I don't have a need for that. So I wanted to make a really toned down traditional white cotton blouse that is just gonna show up here a tiny bit and then have some small sleeves right here, and then just go to the back and come back down here to have, you know, a little something underneath. So we're gonna work on that today, and we're gonna do that with draping. I'm gonna zoom you in just a second because I will be using some tailor's tape to just draw on basically, or tape down the edges of my dress so that I know where to have the blouse, so where it needs to show up. I don't have any points where I can orientate myself at if I don't add some tape there. So that's what we're gonna do right now. So basically what I have right here is just some tailor's tape in a blue color. It doesn't really matter which color it is. I'm just gonna take blue as I have black for my lines on my bust already. So I'm just gonna find the beginning of this tape and basically just go over this pretty roughly and mark the edge, the upper edge of my dress, so that I have something to orientate myself at. Since I'm just gonna drape one side, there is only the need to, you know, mark one side, but as I'm already at it and I'm just gonna go ahead and do one full turn basically, you don't need to do that. You can just go ahead and mark one side, and then, you know, you're gonna mirror it anyways. Okay, and that's already everything that we need for preparation, more or less, so that I have lines on my bust now. And now we can start with draping. So what I want to do with the blouse is have a clean edge right here. I want to have a sweetheart neckline, just as I have with the dress itself as well, and then just a tiny bit higher than the dress. So usually it just needs to be a bit higher than the neckline of the dress. It just peeks up or out a tiny bit and nothing more. And then I'm just gonna continue it up right here and have small little puff sleeves here, and that's already it. I'm gonna have a button tape down here, and then here something elastic so that it's more comfortable, and just cut it right here, and nothing special. Everything here is covered up anyway, so this is just gonna be a easy back, so nothing special. And obviously you can add any lace and whatnot here into the neckline as you wish. It literally does not matter, like you're open to do whatever you want. I won't be doing that. I just want to have a clean edge, nothing special, as the dirndl already is, you know, pretty decorated. So I won't be doing that for this blouse, but obviously the pattern is very versatile. You can add whatever you want to it with your own design. So let's start draping. So I'm gonna have here, just as I have with the dress itself, a dividing seam. Also has all of the darts. So I'm just gonna start with putting a piece of fabric with the grain down the center front and just wrap it around and just pin it onto the side seams. We're gonna add something else here anyways, so that it's just gonna stay there for a second. And what I will be doing is have everything be smoothed out over here. Maybe I'm gonna add some dividing lines with my tape before I do any of this, just to have more orientation, so that I will be able to just basically draw on the shape and then just follow that with my fabric. To me, that always seems the easiest way. I don't want to have the armhole seam visible when the blouse is worn, so I'm gonna take in the shoulder a tiny bit and have the seam a bit more inwards, so that if the dress is here, the seam of the blouse is a tiny bit more inwards and it's gonna be covered up by the dress itself. I'm gonna do exactly the same to the back. We're gonna have to do a fitting anyway, so nothing here is set, basically. Everything can still be changed. That should be enough. Now we can put back the fabric and we can more or less draw the shape of the blouse by following these lines. So all of this here needs to be set, and now we can just move everything to the right. We're not going to add any darts or anything here. We're going to use an elastic to cinch this in. So I don't think that I'm going to have anything taken out here, honestly. I'll just go down here this line and pin it so that there's a bit more volume here, and probably do the same thing with this piece right here so that we can have an elastic to cinch everything in. And now I'm just gonna take my pen and draw however I want this to be. So this is where my dress stops. So I want the blouse to be a tiny bit higher than that. So maybe up until here, and then have a nice curve. Not sure yet, as I said, we have to do a fitting for that. And then just go generally all the way down to the under bust line. But I think I will add a couple of centimeters, maybe 2 centimeters to the length, just because this is very short. So I'm just gonna continue the under bust line and then draw in all of the dividing seams right here. Maybe like this. I will also add some sort of marker here where I stopped the dress. I will also probably have to move this line a tiny bit in, so that this now shows quite a bit and this here only would show a tiny bit. So maybe I'm just gonna move it to here, so like a centimeter inwards. But honestly, that's something that I have to do once everything is a pattern, a paper pattern. So what I will be doing now is I'm just gonna leave this on here on the bust, but cut out this line right here. Just have this like this. Now I'm gonna put the pins in so everything here stays where it's supposed to be. And now I'm gonna do the side front part, which has quite a lot of height as the shoulders are in there. The grain line follows still the center front, so I'm just gonna keep this close to the shape of the bust and then draw on all of the lines of my front piece that I just draped. And then I'm just gonna follow this. Probably 1 centimeter up is a good thing. And here with the sleeves, I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm just gonna have all of this close to the body and then draw in my side seam and have all of this down here, or most of it probably cinched in with the elastic. Guess that's the easiest option. So we have a tiny bit more width here. And I'm just gonna follow the curve of the sleeve that I taped down as the first try, basically. And then we can still see if it looks good or not. So like this. And then draw in here the dividing lines, or not the dividing lines, this is the bust line. So draw that in as a marker. And that is the side front piece. And now I'm just gonna cut this off again. And just repeat the same with the back piece. This should be fairly straightforward. Up here, to smooth the neck curve a tiny bit, I'm just gonna cut off the excess and pin this down smoothly again so that I can draw on the shape of the neckline in the front. I'm also gonna smooth down the armhole towards the side seam and everything here. I'm just gonna leave it loose so that I'm gonna cinch in with the elastic, all of that later on. And that's already it. I can already draw on the shape of the back piece. And up here, I'm also gonna add the 1 centimeter that I did with the front piece at the neckline. So this should just follow along. You probably can't see that right now, but I'm just gonna add the 1 centimeter to just have a smooth neckline all around. And that's already it. We're gonna do the sleeves not by draping, but we're gonna put everything down and then make a sleeve pattern out of that, as that's probably the easiest way instead of just, you know, like experimenting on the bust with a sleeve pattern that, in my opinion, never works as well. But that's basically it. We don't need anything else. So I'm gonna take that off, clean up everything, and then I'm gonna do a sleeve pattern with you guys. Okay, so this is the pattern, how it came off. And as you can see, it's already looking quite promising. So the only thing that I have to do basically is just check if all of the seams are the same length, but that is one thing that I will be doing on the computer while I'm doing the final pattern anyway, so that's nothing that I am worrying about as of right now. But for you guys, if you drape, you should definitely check if all of the seams align, the center back is straight and not doing a wobbly line like this, that the center front is straight. We're gonna add a button tape to this anyways, so we're gonna have this go a bit further out, probably like 2 centimeters, something like that. I don't know if you can see any of that because this pen is not working anymore. So something like this. We're just gonna continue with the shape of the sweetheart neckline and then just gonna add a button tape there. So this will overlap to here, and we're gonna have buttons right here. But as I said, all of that I will be doing on the computer in one go already while I'm grading and, you know, preparing the file and everything for my shop basically. For the sleeves, we're going to use this pattern to more or less just make a sleeve pattern. There's not too much to it. You also can just freehand that. In my opinion, it's especially if you have a sleeve that is gathered up here and gathered here with either an elastic, or what I will be doing is probably do some sort of cuff up here at the hem of the sleeve. There's not too much that you have to know. So for the sleeve itself, I just printed out my custom sleeve chart. The link is always down in the description below. Custom size chart is the name of it. You can download it from my website for free, and you're gonna find on page 3 and 4 of that PDF the charts to make your sleeve pattern. And I also made a video for that, so you can click up here in the eye and check that out if you want to, you know, learn how to make a sleeve from scratch. I won't be doing that, as I said, everything will be gathered and, you know, not really, it doesn't have to be very detailed and so on. So I will be just using a pattern that I already made with the instructions of my video up that is linked in the eye up there. So if you want to do that, you can either base your sleeve pattern on whatever you draped here by following the video, or you can just use a pattern that uses the same measurements basically. So I also made the pattern to my measurements. My bust has my measurements because I made it myself. So my sleeve that I have is for my measurements, if that makes sense. And everything that is not completely correct will not matter, as it will be gathered everywhere where, you know, it matters. So therefore I will be just using a pattern that I already made, and I'm going to show you how to adapt the pattern to be gathered in the end and, you know, to fit this specific bodice that I just draped. So there are a few things that I would just check in order to, make sure that it is possible to work with this pattern, which would be the overall length of the shoulder of this, the sleeve cap, I think is the name. So I just drew where, like these two notches, I just drew them in. So basically this should be somewhat the same curve, and as you can see, the notch just perfectly matches. That was just by chance. And then I am just quickly measuring the length of my sleeve, and as you can see here, there are about 3 centimeters missing, which we have to think of. And here, this is also 1.5 centimeters bigger, and then here is also about 3 centimeters missing. So overall, this piece right here, the sleeve cap, is 6 centimeters or 7 centimeters too small, so we have to adjust for that. And we're gonna do that by, first of all, drawing this onto a different piece of paper and then just slashing it and opening it up so that we have more volume up here. We're also gonna do that to the hem of the sleeve because I want to have a small cuff. So I also want to have gathers here, and therefore we're just gonna open it up and make it bigger to fit this pattern here. So ultimately, I'm going to do that on the computer, but I will be showing you how to do that on paper. So I just quickly drew the shape of a sleeve right here onto a smaller scale and a sheet of paper. And basically what I will be doing is, first of all, put a hemline in there. So somewhere here, I want to have a short sleeve, and then I'm just gonna cut that out and only work with this. And what I will be doing here is add to different sections of the sleeve different amounts, basically. So I need, that's the shoulder point up here, I need an amount in this area, I need an amount in this area, and then I also needed one here. So that splitting the sleeve in somewhat equal amounts. And now I can just cut the sleeve and open it up like this. I will be adding more towards the sleeve cap than towards the hem. Therefore, I have a curve down here. And then I will just put this onto a piece of paper like this. Tape it down. Obviously, you want to measure how much you put up here. You want to put somewhat equal amounts into, the different spots. Probably a bit less here than here. And once you've done that, you're gonna go ahead and redraw the sleeve. I want to add a tiny bit of height to the sleeve cap itself because I wanted to also have more room to gather. So I'm also gonna add some height and then just redraw the sleeve and transfer the notches to these specific positions, and then do exactly the same to the hemline here. And now you can basically gather everything up here to fit the sleeves in the bodice. That is exactly what I will be doing with my pattern. I will be doing it digitally from the very beginning, as that's just the quickest way for me and I don't have to work around with paper patterns. I will be digitizing this pattern while I'm doing that. I also have a video on that, how I do that. If you want to check the digitizing video out, you can click up in the I as well for that. And I will be back once the pattern is finished so we can do a mock-up. So as you can see, I made a mock-up and I specifically put my dress on top of it so that I see how everything looks like with a dress on top of it. So as you can see right here, the neckline just looks up. It's just a tiny bit visible. With the pattern, how it's usually done, you don't have this here, this wavy thing. You don't have that, so this is what it would look like. I have to say though that it is not tight enough down here, so I put an elastic in there and it's just not tight enough, so this would usually be a tiny bit lower, so that's fine. Then also here the sleeve, as you can see right here, also in the back, you don't see the seam of the sleeve at all, which was my goal, but I feel like it is a tiny bit too long, so I'm just gonna make the sleeve like 2 or 3 centimeters even shorter. I like the cuff, I like how all of that looks, and then here in the sides I will put the seam a tiny bit more towards the side because I just feel like it frames it better. If it just disappears here in the corner and then gets visible up here again, I feel like if it stays as the pattern is, first of all, it wrinkles up a tiny bit. And then second of all, I think it narrows the chest area, which I don't like. It just doesn't look flattering. I will adapt the pattern to look like this. And also probably take out a tiny bit of the front piece here while doing that. Maybe a centimeter, something like that, just to make it fit better, because at the moment it feels kind of loose up here. So that's the goal here. I will probably also take out a tiny bit on this corner right there, as this is also a bit too loose. So I will just cut the sleeve here and then just make it tighter here on this side. But apart from that, the sleeve worked out perfectly fine. The shape itself generally also worked out very well. The length is good too, so I won't have to add anything to it. It sits like right below the bust, so that's where it's supposed to be. Everything worked out well. And I will adapt the pattern and come back to you once I am done and once I start sewing the real thing. I cut out all of the pattern pieces right here, and we're gonna start with preparation. I already ironed on interfacing to the 3 pieces that needed, which is the under bust band and then the sleeve cuffs. So they're interfaced already. So what we're going to do first of all is iron the seam allowance of one side of the waistband up. And as you can see, it's just perfectly ironing up because it has already perforations in the interfacing. And now we can go ahead and fold this in half, and that's already all that we have to prepare for this waistband. And we're going to do exactly the same preparation method for the cuffs as well. So we're going to have 3 pieces that are folded in the same way. So these are these 3 pieces, and we're going to start with the outer fabric. You're going to find lining pieces and outer fabric pieces, so you can go ahead and just separate those. Put one to the lining layer and then the other ones we're going to use now. We're going to start with the front and side front, and we're just going to put right sides together of these 2 pieces and close the front dividing seam on both sides. And we're going to understitch the seam as well. There is no need to overlock these bodice seams because we have the lining, but we're going to overlock the sleeve seams. So that's something that we're going to do once we're there. So first of all, we're going to close the front dividing seam on both of the front pieces and understitch the seam. I understitch the seam so that the seam goes towards the side seam, and I also cut towards the notch. So I only sewed towards the notch and then cut towards the stitching line. So while understitching, I'm able to turn the seam allowance outwards, because it's just nicer and easier once we put everything together, as there won't be as much bulk. So we're gonna cut all of that off. Like, we're gonna cut it down to so that it's not bulky that much. And I'm just gonna give this a press like that. And now we can continue already and put the back piece onto the shoulders and then also onto the side. So just right sides together. So here the shoulders and so the sides. We're going to iron the seam allowance towards the back in the shoulder and the side seams. And that is already the outer layer. We're going to repeat exactly the same for the lining layer, with the only difference of the center front being open. So you have to close the center front seam as well and iron it open, and then just do exactly the same as you did for the outer bodice layer. Okay, so now both layers are done. This is the lining and this is the outer layer. We can go ahead and put these together. So we are just gonna put right sides of both of these together and just close the neckline. And we're gonna leave the bottom, so the waistline or the underbust line, still open. I'm just gonna align all of the notches, all of the seams and so on and so forth. And right here in this seam, I am keeping everything neat and tidy, but I'm going to cut towards the stitching line right here and cut off a triangle so that it is not in the way. I will be doing exactly the same here on the inner side so that I have nothing that overlaps right here. I will be doing exactly the same on my lining pieces like this, and then also cut off a triangle right here so that I have a no bulk once I put these together, and I'm not going to stitch on top of the seam allowances that I will be cutting away once I'm done with this, so just to avoid anything. And now I will be putting all of the notches, all of the seams together, so like center back, shoulder seam, the corner here in the front at the front dividing seam, notches here, the center front, and then of course right here everything, and I am sewing the neckline together. Okay, before we turn everything over, we're going to cut away seam allowances. So I cut away the corner right here. I will be cutting this seam allowance right towards this corner down as much as possible. So like down to around 2 millimeters, otherwise it won't turn around. I will be cutting into the seam allowance towards the stitching line here at this curve, just for it to lay better. And then just repeat exactly the same on the other side. Like this. And I can turn everything over and just check if everything looks nice, especially here in the corners, because these are the most tricky corners, and obviously they're sitting right in the front, so you want to check that everything looks neat and tidy, just like this. So this looks good. So now we can go ahead and understitch this seam. So we want to fold our seam allowance towards the lining in this direction and very closely to the fold or to the seam that we just did, just top stitch next to it. Basically we're stitching the seam allowance onto the lining. That's called understitching, and that's what we're going to do all around. You probably won't be able to do that all the way towards this corner here, as it's a bit fiddly, so you just stop as far as you can go. You just stop there and then you start a new seam over here. You should be able to just sew over top of here and then all around, and do the same on this corner here as well. And that's just going to help the lining fall how it's supposed to, so that the ditch of the seam won't be visible on the outer side, and it's always going to fold towards the lining. But we're going to iron that as well once we're done with understitching. And now we can actually iron the piece. So I like to turn my facing upwards so that it's easier. It's just easier for me to iron that way. So I'm just gonna fold the ditch of the seam towards the facing side, take out all of the corners that are in the pattern. So especially like right here, I want to take out the corner and then neatly iron this. And as you can see, the understitching helps very much when doing this, because it just also folds the ditch of the seam towards the facing, so that's really, really nice. And then I'm just gonna go around the piece and just iron everything towards the facing, or like iron all of the seams towards the facing. So the bodice is almost done. We can go ahead and do all of the gathering now. So we have our sleeves that look like this, and we have to gather it from the front sleeve point to the back sleeve point, and then also this line right here, so the sleeve hem, and then we also have to gather the underbust seam right here to fit into all of the bands, or like the cuff, and here into the sleeve itself. So what I am doing for that is using my biggest stitch, and without back tacking, I'm going all around my sleeve cap to the back sleeve notch, and then just turn around and go back to the front sleeve notch again to have 2 sets of stitches, because that just makes for a nicer gather. And I will be doing exactly the same here, here, and on this underbust seam as well. So we have all in all 5 different seams together, and that's what we're gonna do right now. And now we can go ahead and knot under, like bobbin thread and the upper thread so that we can pull on them together. We're gonna pull on the bobbin thread, but technically you could pull on both. I just like to do the bobbin thread, and we are going to gather everything to fit our underbust band. And since we turned over here, we don't have to think about the gathers to just go out here. This way they're trapped basically, and we can just gather as much as we need to without having to think about it. And this length here has to match up with this length plus 2 centimeter seam allowance. So as you can see, it's already there. We're going to continue with our waistband. So we turn right sides on the short edges, and we're just gonna sew this shut right here on this side and then also on the other side so that we have a clean edge that goes together with this clean edge. And we can cut down the seam allowance here just a tiny bit up here at the fold. Just turns nicer, and then just turn this right sides out just like this. And now it's probably easier to match this up. So as you can see, I am good with the length now, so I will be putting a knot into my threads right here so that it doesn't change in width anymore. And then I can also cut off this long bobbin thread that we pulled on. And what I will be doing here is to just have everything nice and even. So I'm just gonna go around here and make nice even gathers with the volume that we have now. And then we can already put the waistband onto the wrong side of the fabric. So this is the wrong side, basically the lining, and we're gonna put the non-ironed side right sides together with the lining. And I'm just gonna find the center back to make it easier. Put a notch in there so that I can line this up with my seam that I have right here. And I'm gonna stitch the underbust band onto my bodice. And now we can push all of the seam allowances into the band and just fold it on top of everything, and then closely to the edge, just on top of the seam that we just did, stitch it onto the bodice, and that is the hem for our blouse that we're gonna do. So it looks very neat and tidy, and we're gonna add a button tape onto this so there will be a button as well. And then we can continue with the gathering of the sleeves. The sleeves work pretty much the same way, but let's finish this off and then we're gonna come back to the sleeves. Okay, I'm going to iron this really quickly so that everything lays nicely. Okay, that looks good. Let's continue with the sleeves. So we also put gathering stitches into the sleeves already. So we're also going to knot together the 2 bobbin threads and the 2 upper threads. So we're going to separate them, and we're going to gather the hem first. So grab either bobbin or upper thread, pair, and just gather this seam to fit this band right here. You don't have to gather too much, it's not too tight, so this should be already enough. I'm going to put a knot into the end as well, and then cut off the long threads here, and then just distribute this evenly. I am going to put like most of the gathers into the middle right here, as that's going to sit on my upper arm, so less on the sides here, as that's going to be hidden anyways. So something like this. And now I'm going to do something similar as I did to the waistband, but before that we're going to close the side seam right here. To continue, we're going to make a circle basically, or a loop out of the cuff. So we're just gonna put right sides together and just sew straight across here and iron this open. Now we can put the unironed side of the cuff together with the wrong side of the sleeve. Just put it inside of here and then align the side seams and just sew this together. And then we're going to fold it on top and also top stitch it just as we did with the underbust band. And to finish everything off, we are going to gather the sleeve part to fit the sleeve cutout in the bodice. So same thing as we did before. And you also want to concentrate the gathers at the shoulder area up here. But you're going to find notches in the sleeve and also in the bodice that you need to match up. So you're going to find some points of orientation. And I already finished the other side. We're just going to put right sides together of sleeve and bodice and then align all of the different points like the side seam and then the front and the back sleeve notch. Make sure also to always have the lining and the outer side of the bodice match up, as well as the lining is a tiny bit smaller than the outer bodice. It might want to, just tuck away a tiny bit, so you need to make sure that these match up. And then we're just going to concentrate the folds at the shoulder and then also make it kind of even and make it fit the cutout. Just use some pins to hold it in place and then repeat the same for the other side. And I'm going to sew this together and then I'm overlocking this. And for the sleeves, the last thing to do is to just try to iron the seam allowance towards the sleeve by trying to not flatten the folds too much, as you can see what I'm doing. And then we can put in the buttonholes and the buttons. You're gonna find the placements for the buttons on the pattern itself. Obviously you can customize that to your size of buttons and to however you like to have it. I will be putting in, I think, 5 buttons into my piece right here. I'll have to figure that out as well. I'm gonna do buttonholes that are 1.5 centimeters long, as I have buttons to match that. And I'm just gonna put them vertically. That's very important, otherwise it's just gonna jump open and you're gonna see inside of your blouse, which you don't want to do. And also the left side when you put it down and the right side when you have the blouse on overlaps the other side. So you always can put your hand into your button tape from the left side. That is the female closing version, I guess, that you find on all blouses. I'm going to mark my buttonholes and continue or finish the piece up. And that's it already for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Of course, I'm going to show you how the blouse looks underneath a dirndl worn in just a second. And if you haven't already, please check if you subscribe to my channel. That would help me very much. And also ring the bell to get notified every time that I post. I post on Sunday, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, how about you go check out my Instagram? I am sharing loads of reels with tips and tricks on sewing, designing, pattern making, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot to see right there. Go ahead and give me a follow on my Instagram there. The link is also in the description down below. If you haven't already, already, and the link to the pattern is also in the description and in the pinned comment as per usual. That's the most direct way to support me and to keep videos like this coming, as they are a lot of work. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you not next Sunday because I am not in town next Sunday, but in 2 weeks time. So have a good one and bye guys.